and the regimen essential to their enjoyment are inculcated by Masonry as they have been by every other initiatory order of the past, and it is for the fact that this knowledge is and always has been conserved in the world, so as to be ever available for earnest aspirants towards it, that gratitude is expressed to the Grand Master of all for having never left himself, or the way of return to him, without witness in this outer world. As much has been said about the ceremony of the third degree in other papers, it is unnecessary here to expound it further. It may be stated, however, that it alone constitutes the Masonic initiation. The first and second degrees are, strictly, but preparatory stages leading up to initiation. They are not the initiation itself, they but prescribe the purification of the bodily and mental nature necessary to qualify the candidate for the end which crowns the whole work. To those unacquainted with what is really involved in actual as distinct from merely ceremonial initiation, and who have no notion of what initiation meant in the old schools of wisdom and still means for those who understand the theory of regenerative science, it is well nigh impossible to convey any idea of its process or its results. The modern Mason, however high in titular rank, is as little qualified to understand the subject as the man who has never entered a lodge. To become initiated, or perfected, says an old authority, Plutarch, involves dying, not a physical death, but a moral way of dying in which the soul is loosened from the body and the sensitive life, and becoming temporarily detached therefrom is set free to enter the world of eternal light and immortal being. This, after most drastic preliminary disciplines, was achieved in a state of trance and under the supervision of duly qualified masters and adepts who intermitted the candidate's liberated soul into its own interior principles until it at last reached the blazing star of glory at its own center, in the light of which it simultaneously knew itself and God, and realized their unity and the points of fellowships between them. Then it was that, from this at once awful and sublime experience, the initiated soul was brought back to its bodily encasement again and reunited to the companions of its former toils, to resume its temporal life, but with conscious realization of life eternal superadded to its knowledge and its powers. Then only was it entitled to the name of Master Mason. Then only could it exclaim, in the words of another initiate, "Empedocles, farewell, all are at the allies, henceforth am I no mortal wight, but an immortal angel, ascending up into divinity and reflecting upon that likeness of it which I have found in myself." The secrets of Freemasonry and of initiation are largely connected with this process of introversion of the soul to its own center, and beyond this brief reference to the subject it is inexpedient here to say more. But in confirmation of what has been indicated it may be useful to refer to the 23rd Psalm, in which the Hebrew initiates speak of both the supreme experience of being passed through the valley of the shadow of death and the preliminary phases of mental preparation for that ordeal. Stripping that familiar psalm of the gorgeous metaphor given it in the beautiful biblical translation, its real meaning may be paraphrased and explained for Masonic students as follows: "The vital and immortal principle within me is my initiator, and is all sufficient to lead me to God. It has made me lie down, in self-discipline and humiliation, in green pastures of meditation and mental sustenance. It has led me beside still waters of contemplation, as distinct from the rough sea of passion of my natural self. It is restoring my soul, reintegrating it out of chaos and disorder. Even when I come to pass through the valley of deadly gloom, my own interior veils of darkness, I will fear no evil, for it is with me, as a guiding star. Its directions and disciplines will safeguard me. It provides me with the means of overcoming my inner enemies and weaknesses, it anoints my intelligence with the oil of wisdom, the cup of my mind brims over with new light and consciousness. The divine love and truth, which I shall find face to face at my center, will be a conscious presence to me all the days of my temporal life, and thereafter I shall dwell in a house of the Lord, a glorified spiritual body, forever." The third degree is completed in, and can only be more fully expounded by reference to, the Holy Royal Large Ceremony. A separate further paper will, therefore, be devoted to that ceremony. The Masonic Apron. From what has been said in these pages, the full significance of the apron will now be perceived and may be summarized thus: 1. The apron is the symbol of the corporeal vesture and condition of the soul, not so much of the temporal physical body, as of its permanent invisible corporeality which will survive the death of the mortal part. 2. The soul fabricates its own body or apron by its own desires and thoughts. See Genesis 3:7, they made themselves aprons, and as these are pure or impure, so will that body be correspondingly transparent and white, or dense and opaque. 3. The investiture of the candidate with the apron in each degree by the senior warden as the maester's delegate for that purpose is meant to inculcate this truth, for the senior warden represents the soul which, in accordance with its own spirituality, automatically clothes itself with its own self-made vesture in a way that marks its own progress or regress. 4. The unadorned white apron of the first degree indicates the purity of soul contemplated as being attained in that degree. 5. The pale blue rosettes added to the apron in the second degree indicate that progress is being made in the science of regeneration and that the candidate's spirituality is beginning to develop and bud through. Blue, the color of the sky, is traditionally associated with devotion to spiritual concerns. 6. In the third degree still further progress is emblematized by the increased blue adornments of the apron, as also by its silver tassels and the silver serpent used to fasten the apron strings. In the first and second degrees no metal has appeared upon the apron. The candidate has been theoretically divesting himself of all base metals and transmuting them into spiritual riches. With mastership he has attained an influx of those riches under the emblem of the tassels of silver, a colorless precious metal always associated with the soul, as gold by reason of its supreme value and warm color is associated with spirit. The silver serpent is the emblem of divine wisdom knitting the soul's new-made vesture together. 7. The pale blue and silver of the Master Mason's apron become intensified in the deep blue and gold ornamentation worn by the Grand Lodge officers, who in theory have evolved to still deeper spirituality and transmuted themselves from silver into fine gold. The king's daughter, the soul, is all glorious within, her clothing is of wrought gold, that is, wrought or fabricated by her own spiritual energies. A prayer at lodge closing. O sovereign and most worshipful of all masters, who, in thy infinite love and wisdom, hast devised our order as a means to draw thy children nearer thee, and hast so ordained its officers that they are emblems of thy sevenfold power. Be thou unto us an outer guard, and defend us from the perils that beset us when we turn from that which is without to that which is within. Be thou unto us an inner guard, and preserve our souls that desire to pass within the portal of thy holy mysteries. Be unto us the younger deacon, and teach our wayward feet the true and certain steps upon the path that leads to thee. Be thou also the elder deacon, and guide us up the steep and winding stairway to thy throne. Be unto us the lesser warden, and in the meridiant sunlight of our understanding speak to us in sacraments that shall declare the splendors of thy unmanifested light. Be thou also unto us the greater warden, and in the awful hour of disappearing light, when vision fails and thought has no more strength, be with us still, revealing to us, as we may bear them, the hidden mysteries of thy shadow. And so, through light and darkness, raise us, great Master, till we are made one with thee, in the unspeakable glory of thy presence in the East. So mote it be. Chapter 4. The Holy Royal RFRr6F of Jerusalem. Freemasonry, under the English Constitution, reaches its climax and conclusion in the Order of the Holy Royal Arch. There exists a variety of other degrees ramifying from the main stem of the Masonic system which either elaborate side points of its doctrine or re-express its teachings in alternative symbolism. These, while of greater or less merit and interest, are beyond our present consideration, and, indeed, are superfluities tending rather to diffuse the student's attention than to deepen his insight into the central purpose of the craft. The taking of additional higher degrees may be indulged in almost indefinitely, but to what purpose if the initial ones, which contain all that is necessary for the understanding of the subject, remain imperfectly assimilated. It is a fallacy to suppose that the multiplying of degrees will result in the discovery of important arcane secrets which one has failed to find in the rites of the craft and the Royal Arch. The higher degrees indeed illustrate truths of much interest and often set forth with impressive ceremonial beauty, the appreciation of which will be the greater after and not before the meaning of the preliminary ones has been thoroughly absorbed, whilst the pursuit of secrets is certain to prove illusory. For the only secrets worth the name or the finding are those incommunicable ones which discover themselves within the personal consciousness of the seeker who is in earnest to translate ceremonial representation into facts of spiritual experience. It was accordingly a sound instinct that prompted those who settled the present constitution of the order to exclude these supplementary refinements and to declare that Masonry consists of the 3 craft degrees in the Holy Royal Arch and no more. For within that compass is exhibited, or at least outlined, the entire process of human regeneration, so that after the Royal Arch there really remains nothing more to be said, although what has been said is of course capable of elaboration. The completeness of regeneration theoretically postulated in those 4 stages is marked, it should be observed, by the very significant expression used in connection with the Royal Arch chapter, which is interpreted as meaning my people having obtained mercy, which in its further analysis signifies that all the parts and faculties, people, of the candidate's organism have at last, and as a result of his previous discipline and ordeals, become sublimated and integrated in a new quality and higher order of life than that previously enjoyed in virtue of his merely temporal nature. In a word, he has become regenerated. He has achieved the miracle of squaring the circle, a metaphorical expression for regeneration, as shall be explained presently. Although but an expansion and completion of the 3rd degree, of which at one time it formed part, there are good reasons for detaching the Royal Arch portion from what now forms the degree of Master Mason. The 2 parts in combination made an inconveniently long rite, whilst a change in the symbolic appointments and officers of the Temple of Initiation was necessary, as the ceremony proceeded, to give appropriate spectacular representation to the further points calling for expression. Despite this rearrangement, the Royal Arch is the natural conclusion and fulfillment of the 3rd degree. The latter inculcates the necessity of mystical death and dramatizes the process of such death and revival therefrom into newness of life. The Royal Arch carries the process a stage farther, by showing its fulfillment in the exaltation or apotheosis of him who has undergone it. The Master Mason's degree might be said to be represented in the terms of Christian theology by the formula he suffered and was buried and rose again, whilst the equivalent of the exaltation ceremony is he ascended into heaven. The Royal Arch degree seeks to express that new and intensified life to which the candidate can be raised and the exalted degree of consciousness that comes with it. From being conscious merely as a natural man and in the natural restricted way common to everyone born into this world, he becomes exalted, whilst still in his natural flesh, to consciousness in a supernatural and illimitable way. As has been said in previous papers, the purpose of all initiation is to lift human consciousness from lower to higher levels by quickening the latent spiritual potentialities in man to their full extent through appropriate discipline. No higher level of attainment is possible than that in which the human merges in the divine consciousness and knows as God knows. And that being the level of which the Order of the Royal Arch treats ceremonially, it follows that Masonry as a sacramental system reaches its climax and conclusion in that order. As has also been already shown, to attain that level involves as its essential prerequisite the total abnegation, renouncement and renovation of one's original nature, the surrender of one's natural desires, tendencies and preconceptions, and the abandonment and nullifying of one's natural self-will, by such a habitual discipline and self-denial and gradual but vigorous opposition to all these as will cause them gradually to atrophy and die down. He that loveth his life shall lose it, and he that hateth his life in this world shall keep it unto life eternal. Except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone, but if it die it bringeth forth much fruit. As with the seed of wheat, so with man. If he persists in clinging to